Greetings, everyone. I want to welcome you to Creating Meaning and Connection in Relationships, today's webinar. My name is Aaron Short. I'm a licensed professional counselor based out of Colorado Springs, also licensed in Texas, Oregon, Idaho, Montana, all over the place as I work for Maru. I tend to specialize in mindfulness, trauma, and men's issues if I'm in private practice. And I work within Maru as the lead train and implementation specialist. Essentially, I just get to train our fine folks on how to run the program and how to care for people well in the program. So I'm grateful you're here. And we also have my colleague Mayu, who's running all the magic in the background to make sure that we can move through this nice and smoothly. So thanks to her. Today, we're going to talk about connection. I think this African proverb actually speaks to the entirety of this presentation. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. Just the reality of connection, community, and the benefit that it has for longevity. I think you'll see that theme pop up a few times throughout our talk today. And by the way, our talk today will last about 40 minutes or so. So today we're going to cover a variety of different topics, all connected to connection. The first, the unexpected impact of isolation. Next, key aspects of connection. And then we'll talk about the role of secure attachment. Then we'll move into cultivating connection. How do we build that? And lastly, we'll talk about practices for connection in relationships. So John Cacioppo, and I believe I'm butchering his last name, wrote a book called Lethality of Loneliness, where he studied the effect of isolation and the effect of connection on us and our health. And there's a couple quotes here that I think are going to really drive home the point of why connection matters. First, when we are lonely, we not only react more intensely to the negatives, we also experience less of a soothing uplift from the positives. So the worse is worse, and even the good things we don't experience to the degree that we would if we are in community and in connection with others. Again, continuing with Dr. John, as he studied, the effect of social interaction and its impact on us. What mattered was not the number of social interactions, nor the degree to which other people provided practical benefit, but the degree to which social interactions satisfied an individual's specific, subjective need for connection. So it's not necessarily just the number of friends we have, the number of connections we have, but it's really the quality and the depth of those friendships and connections. And he not only looked at the effect on the individual, but also the effect on the community itself. And he cited that loneliness is contagious because when we suddenly become lonely, we begin to pull back, which results in others pulling back from us, and the loneliness spreads, not unlike a virus. And data out of the CDC also speaks to the effect of isolation in that it increases premature death, risk of premature death from all causes, and even rivals smoking, obesity, and physical inactivity, and even sees a 50% increase in the risk of dementia. So very severe. In addition, these 2 points have already been covered, but these poor social relationships are also associated with 29% increase in risk of heart disease, 32% increase in risk of stroke, depression, anxiety, and suicide at elevated levels, and even a 4-time increased risk of death for heart failure patients, a 68% increased risk of death of risk of hospitalization, and 57 increased risk of emergency department visits. So across the boards, a variety of detrimental effects. So hopefully by now, I've made the case that isolation is bad and connection is good. And the reality is that we are wired for connection. There's no two ways about it. So James Cone actually did research in regard to the effect of hand-holding and what that can do for us, such a simple act. And a great quote from him is that our brains are born expecting our social networks to be there, The strange thing is when we are alone. So the connection is the norm and the outlier is the isolation. In his research, as he looked at why we hold hands and what effect it has on us, he stated, as you can see here, holding hands with a trusted relational partner, like a friend, a romantic partner, a parent, sibling, a child, is literally good for your health. And he cites a variety of benefits. Makes shock less painful, so pain is not perceived to as extreme a degree. It reduces activity in the hypothalamus, which is responsible for regulating part of the body's stress response. And the degree to which that is true, it corresponds with better general health and well-being. So this simple act, but a very powerful act. And when we think about connection, there is sort of an underlying question that we're actually asking of others that are within our circle. And it's, will you be there when I really need you? And we think about attachment, healthy attachment versus, insecure or chaotic attachment when we use that kind of language. But really that question is, are you a safe haven? Are you going to be able to buffer me from stress? Are you a secure base where I could explore out from? Think, childhood development in this regard. Are you accessible? Even if you have these qualities, can I get to you to experience them? And are you responsive? Will you respond to my happiness, my pain, my fear, my concern? And so when we're building attachment as parents helping build attachment in our children, thankfully, it's not about being perfect. I'm a parent myself, and I feel completely inadequate the majority of the time. And I find that a little bit of solace in the reality that secure attachment isn't created by being a perfect parent, responding perfectly to every situation, but rather recognizing when something wasn't responded to well and seeking to repair that rupture. And that's where we can connect with our child. That's where healing can occur. And that's where that attachment actually grows in strength. So I'd like to take a moment, now that we're talking about relationship and the importance of attachment and why it matters. And I'll steal heavily from Dr. Dan Siegel here. I'd recommend visiting his website, drdansiegel, SIEGEL.com, if you'd like to look into his work that he's done on mindfulness and connection and attachment. But from that, I'd like to steal from one of his meditations. If you would just, if you're willing, go ahead and take a deep breath in through the nose, out through the mouth. And begin to allow your awareness to be filled by your perception and your awareness of your connection to others. You can begin first by focusing on people in your general proximity, maybe others in the room that you're in the house or building that you're in. Maybe as you open yourself up to it, you're even able to feel a connection or a perception of those outside of the building or on the block, other neighbors on your street. And now allow yourself to become aware of your connection to your loved ones, friends, family. Considering your parents, considering your children. Noticing these threads that connect us. And as you feel that connection, I just ask you to notice what it does to you. Does it make you feel calm? Does it cause an emotion? Let's go ahead and take a deep, deep breath in through the nose. Let's ride the exhalation all the way back to our webinar today so we can keep going. But don't lose the memory of what that perception of connection did for you. And as we continue to think about relationships, let's talk about cultivating connection and reciprocal relationships, relationships where both sides are contributing. It's important when you're engaged in a reciprocal relationship to understand, what the dance and the stance is. How are you interacting with each other? How are you relating to each other? Sometimes we'll find that we exist within a pursue and withdraw relationship where we chase after somebody and they withdraw from us, or we chase after somebody, they acknowledge us and we withdraw from them. Sometimes we'll exist in a defend, criticize, where that is the dynamic of communication that's existing. And I just ask you to think about the relationships that you're in and consider how that question, will you be there for me when I really need you, is being answered or not answered. So Dr. John Gottman of the Gottman Institute, loved by therapists and counselors around the world for the efficacy of his very analytical approach to working with relationships in a therapeutic setting, has identified what he calls the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. There are these 4 elements of communication that might exist in a relationship that can be remarkably destructive. And those are criticism, so verbally attacking the personality or the character; contempt, attacking sense of self with an intent to insult or abuse somebody else; defensiveness, victimizing yourself to ward off a perceived attack and reverse the blame, deflect that blame back on somebody else; and then stonewalling, withdrawing to avoid conflict and convey disapproval, distance, and separation. So these are the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, very destructive to relationship. And just to continue, to develop a deeper understanding of those, let's go ahead and watch this video.
You're so selfish.
Ugh, what an idiot.
It's not my fault we're always late.
Forget it.
Criticism, contempt, defensiveness, and stonewalling. Dr. John Gottman calls these negative communication patterns the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse because they'll lead to the end of your relationship. In fact, he can predict this relationship failure with over 90% accuracy if the behavior isn't changed. So, what can you do? Well, at the Gottman Institute, we understand you might not even know you're communicating this way, or you might not know how to control it. But if you practice the following 4 research-based antidotes, there is hope for your future. Criticism attacks the character of the recipient instead of focusing on a specific behavior. The antidote to criticism is to talk about your feelings using I statements, then express a positive need. Contempt is an expression of superiority that comes out as sarcasm, cynicism, name-calling, eye-rolling, sneering, mockery, and hostile humor. Contempt is the greatest predictor of relationship failure and must be eliminated. The antidote to contempt is to treat one another with respect and build a culture of appreciation within the relationship. Defensiveness is self-protection through righteous indignation or playing the victim. Defensiveness never solves the problem and is really just an underhanded way of blaming your partner. The antidote to defensiveness is to accept responsibility, even if only for part of the conflict. Stonewalling occurs when the listener withdraws from the conversation without resolving anything. It takes time for the negativity created by the first 3 horsemen to result in stonewalling, but when it does, it can become a habit. The antidote to stonewalling is to break for at least 20 minutes, calm down, then return to the conversation. Spare your relationship from certain destruction. Learn more about eliminating the 4 horsemen by visiting our site.
And I do strongly encourage you to visit that website. There's a remarkable amount of useful and free information that they provide. So continuing on with some of those antidotes, because we don't want to have you unequipped, if you know about the problem, but not how to remedy it or work towards change, then we aren't really being very helpful. So criticism, the first that was mentioned, essentially the antidote is a gentle startup, just talking about your feelings, using I statements and expressing positive need. I feel X, I need blank, being very clear and intentional. Within the Maru program, you'll find the thinking traps, analysis, non-judgmental observation of emotions, the difficult emotions practices based around the 6-minute reset, writing waves of emotions, and even within the boundaries week, the DEAR practice where you're learning to describe what you're experiencing, express your emotions and feelings, assert what you need within that situation that you're describing, and then reinforce why it's important to you and even important to the other party. Learning those different skills will help you remedy criticism within your relationship. Next mentioned was contempt. And the antidote for contempt is actually building a culture of appreciation, reminding yourself of your partner's positive qualities, finding gratitude for positive actions. And this is something obviously that your partner can do as well. And ideally, you would be doing this together so that it's even more effective and doesn't feel like a one-sided sort of quest for change within the relationship. Within the Muru program, you're going to find the gratitude journal to be helpful in this, as well as reflections on a joyful memory. It actually triggers similar chemicals and hormones in the brain when you remember positive interaction, same as actually having positive interactions in the present. Compassionate action towards someone else helps build that culture of appreciation. And then within our values week, naming and acting on your own values so you're more in line with who you truly are and don't have that sense of contempt because you're living authentically as yourself. 3, defensiveness, and the antidote is taking responsibility, even if it's 1% of the situation. It takes 2 to tango, and almost always there is something that we can find to take ownership over in a conflict or in an issue within a relationship. And within the Maru program, you're going to find recognizing emotions, identifying thinking traps, that 6-minute reset to face emotions, and noticing thoughts, beneficial in taking responsibility, because it'll help you with that observer perspective on the situation and elevate you above emotional reaction to it so that you're able to be a little bit more intentional and analytical as you look at the argument or whatever the rupture is. And stonewalling. And that's the antidote is physiological self-soothing. Taking a break, spending time doing something enjoyable. Within the Maru program, you have the self-compassion breaks, compassionate action towards others, but also compassionate actions for yourself. Mood boosting activities. These can be physical, like going for a run or a walk. They can also be, cognitive, if you're reading your favorite book and you're able to have your mood boosted through that. And breathing, and of course, the heart rate variability practices as well. So all of these different practices are excellent antidotes for those 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. So let's just take a moment. We'll take maybe 1 minute. You just close your eyes and breathe, and I'll walk you through. Just to yourself, if you would name one action that you can take today to care for yourself or to care for your relationship. And now from the list of practices that I mentioned that are all found within the program, just think of one practice that you might engage in or you might revisit if you've already completed. Be it keeping a gratitude journal, doing one compassionate act for yourself or somebody else, engaging in a mood boosting activity like jogging or reading, Just think of one practice you might adopt that you could do on a regular basis. And lastly, as you sit here, just ask that you consider what it is that you are grateful for in your life. Think about how you might reinforce that gratitude. Perhaps it's been a rough week, and your gratitude journal might have something like the sun is shining. To get out in that sunshine, to feel it warm on your face, to enjoy that experience would be one way to reinforce that sense of gratitude. Now let's go ahead and take a deep, deep breath. And ride that exhalation back to the webinar. We'll continue on. So we've talked about relationships with a partner, but what about cultivating connection with children? So in cultivating connection with children, we try to create what's called a yes brain within the child. And again, Dr. Dan Siegel is a genius in this. Please visit his website to check him out. But you don't have to be a neurosurgeon to help create an integrated, structurally strong brain in your child. You have to have a relationship that inspires them to rewire their brain towards integration. And how do we do that? This is a long quote. I'm not going to read it, but let's all observe, let's all read it together. And I'll give us a couple of minutes to move through, because there are gems throughout the entire element. Otherwise, I would have trimmed it down. Right. So obviously the yes brain is what we are hoping to achieve and hoping to foster. So 4 elements of the yes brain: balance, state of receptivity, allows us to embrace the whole range of our emotional experience. Resilience is the capacity to shift from reactivity to receptivity and come back to balance. So reacting to a stressor, but then becoming receptive to others, becoming balanced, where we can embrace the fullness of our emotional experience. Insight, having awareness of our own internal state, and it cultivates understanding of ourselves as well as others, which obviously leads to the 4th item there: empathy, the sensations and feelings we get in response to others' emotions, as well as the ability to understand and share the feelings of another person. So how do we foster those elements? You value the child's negative emotions and see that as an opportunity for intimacy, where you can connect with them. Because the child's negative emotions, they're actually expressing a need for increased stability and need for regulation that we can provide as they develop their own understanding and techniques and skills to do it themselves eventually. Being aware of and valuing our own emotions in that experience. Again, seeing that world of negative emotions as an important arena for parenting, not something to be avoided or, squashed as soon as they show up, but rather a place that we can step into and provide strength and guidance, and leadership and love and hope. Obviously not avoiding fun, or not poking fun or making light of a child's negative feelings. They are absolutely valid. It's really a way that a child is expressing a desire for connection. Avoid saying how the child should feel, but rather try to help them develop their own ability to label their emotions. And using those emotional moments, obviously, you're going to listen to your child, empathize with them, help them label the emotions, like I mentioned, offer them guidance from what you know about regulating their emotions. Perhaps they can take a walk, they can take a coloring page, do breathing exercises. Set limits and teach acceptable expressions of emotion. So just because we're trying to encourage emotional expression doesn't mean that you have to essentially allow anything to be okay. You can say this is the boundaries that we exist in regard to what is okay for expressing emotion in our home. And obviously teach problem-solving skills as a way of regulating emotions and caring for themselves. Again, Siegel has this acronym PART that he likes to teach just in regard to ways to connect with your child. Being present for their request if they are bringing something to you, attuning to the feelings behind the request, because often when a child is asking for something, they're actually asking for connection or increased stability or help with something else. Resonating with the request itself, like, hey, maybe they're asking for ice cream. I'd like ice cream too. I'm with you. Because perhaps in asking for ice cream, the deeper question is like, are you with me? Do you want to engage with me? Am I worthwhile to spend time with? So I'm not saying that we have to give in to every request that our children have for us, but that deep connection that can occur, I think, is worth an ice cream or two. And obviously it goes a long way to item number 4, developing that trust that you are accessible, responsive rather, and emotionally engaged. That deep question that each child has as they, develop and become who they are in the world. Will you be there for me? Just a little bit of fun. Perhaps you've already viewed Laurie Santos' lectures on happiness. She's from Yale. If you Google Laurie Santos, you can access those very easily. But 5 things that'll make you happier from the happiness lab that she was running. They identified getting social, so connecting with people in meaningful and real ways. Giving thanks, that's an element of gratitude, of course. Being in the moment, those mindfulness skills that we try to teach and encourage through Maru. Resting and moving, so being kind to your body, but also using your body in different ways. And then just being kind in general, kind to ourselves. What does that mean in regard to self-care? How can we be compassionate and give ourselves grace and show ourselves kindness? And being kind to others. What can we do to help somebody else feel loved, cared for? What compassion can we show them? So that's bringing us to the end. Obviously, this is no replacement for professional help of any kind. So if that is something that you're seeking, please pursue that through your physician, or obviously searching for a mental health professional in your area. And I just want to express gratitude for you being here today, and thank you for attending this webinar. Thank you very much.